Story 1. My ex-girlfriend's apartment was messy, but she was very attractive. I married her and hired a house cleaner. Story 2. Every day she would call me after work, complaining about how many difficult people she had to deal with throughout the day. Everywhere she went, there was always someone causing her problems. At work, the grocery store, coffee shops, and with her landlord. I always believed her because she was sweet around me, but after she got pregnant, her true self was revealed. She's incredibly harsh. Story 3. I regret to say this, but he called me a bitch within the first month of dating when he got mad at me. Story 4. Really attractive and charismatic. He was, in fact, a pathological liar, but my friends and I never suspected a thing for months. Story 5. He manipulated me into buying things for him and generally used my kindness and generosity. Story 6. Not only physically attractive, but also very intelligent and sharing common ideals. However, the person did not invest the same energy and effort that I did. It was a one-sided relationship. Story 7. He expressed concern that he might be a bad person because he frequently manipulated and lied to everyone he dated. Story 8. I might win this one. He had just been released from prison for the attempted murder of his own mother. Yes, he was that cute. Story 9. He literally said, "I'm probably going to seriously hurt you," the first time we got drunk together. A year later, he started an affair with his best friend's fiancée. I called it Graham. Story 10. They said they don't do emotions, and I thought I could be the exception. Turns out that was the warning. Story 11. He was incredibly attractive. Although I don't want to diminish myself, he was much more attractive than I was, and I couldn't believe that a girl like me could attract someone like him. I was oblivious, and he was not a kind person. Story 12. We hooked up the first night we met at a dive bar. 18 months later, I walked in on her with a guy she met that night at the dive bar. Story 13. The biggest early red flag I ignored was this sentence. I've overcome several addictions to people. I guess because I didn't know what love addiction was, it went over my head. That, along with a few subtle signs that he was manipulative and dishonest, should have raised alarms. This guy took me on the craziest and most painful roller coaster ride of my life twice. He love-bombed me, lied constantly, then ghosted me, and 2 years later we went through the whole thing again. We got back together, overlooked what a terrible person he was and how much he hurt me before. All because he was the best partner I ever had. We lived together and he still ghosted me. I never had a real breakup with this man. I will never make the same mistakes again. I could not be less trusting of people now. Story 14. Unshaved legs. 8 of them. It turned out they were a spider in disguise. This happened to me 3 times, but never again. Story 15. Right now, I am trying to leave my abusive husband and his family. I wouldn't say it's because he's attractive, but I don't feel great about leaving him while he can easily find someone else. Meanwhile, I struggle with my child. It makes you feel really small. Story 16. 7 years living apart from his wife, with no plans to even make the separation official, let alone get a divorce. Story 17. Possessiveness, jealousy, and poor anger management can significantly impact relationships. It's remarkable how physical attraction can cloud a person's judgment. To clarify my previous points, I was best friends with a girl for about 2 years. She was kind to me and was the first person to introduce me to the love language of physical contact. Like hugs. We had a great time together. However, I fell in love with her, not only because she was unique to me, but also because of the way she treated me. I was fully aware that kindness does not equate to love. Our interactions went beyond average friendship. Many mutual friends assumed we were a couple due to our closeness. We held hands, flirted occasionally, and she would often lay her head on my chest while we talked on benches near school. It was difficult not to fall in love and to hope that my feelings were reciprocated. Eventually, I confessed my feelings, but she rejected me multiple times. I tried to maintain the friendship, but each time I brought it up, she would reject me again. I attempted to take it easy, but it was challenging and depressing. It felt like a love that was so close yet so far away, leading me to distance myself to avoid sadness. During this time, the traits of possessiveness, jealousy, and poor anger management became evident, and we had conflicts. Now, we no longer talk. Story 18. When conversations and meetups are always initiated by you and never by others, one-sided relationships can be frustrating. Story 19. Would randomly stop responding to texts in the middle of a conversation. They claimed that they would just fall asleep, and it happens with everyone. They weren't lying. We're married now, and I've seen them fall asleep mid-conversation, while eating dessert, while playing video games, and while teaching a lesson at work. Sometimes a warning sign isn't a warning sign. Story 20. He is a confirmed psychopath. There is much more to the story, and I can share it if people are interested. Story 21. Overly complimenting me is a love-bombing tactic. An attractive person saying I am the one who is attractive, amazing, kind, and sexy is appealing. They try to make you think they are nice and lovely so you ignore their true colors later. Story 22. Confrontational behavior, gaslighting, mistreatment of family members, substance abuse, a defeatist mentality, and an inability to socialize without being under the influence are just a few issues that contribute to these problems. Story 23. I said I would never be with a smoker, but every other part of her is perfect, so I have been able to easily forget that deal breaker. Story 24. She was a bit naive and had missing front teeth. However, she used to wear this mini skirt that I always wanted her to keep on during our intimate moments. She also had a slight body odor, but that didn't bother me much. Story 25. Having a problem with everyone in her life, whether it was coaches, friends, roommates, or parents. It felt like everyone was out to get her, which drained me for years and eventually became a significant reason we broke up. I am much happier now. Story 26. I felt deeply in lust for this person. Now, as I'm growing and still trying to move on, I realized this man treated me like a literal toy. I was 15 at the time. I have a list. When I took my medication for sleep, he would go behind my back and loudly call me a psycho. We were not dating at all. I barely knew him. He would ask for hugs just to grab my rear unexpectedly. I was also deeply insecure at this time, so even though I was strongly uncomfortable and shocked by what he did, I took it as a good thing. He would text me to come over just to later ghost me. He did this multiple times. He would beg for nude photos after I said no until I finally said yes. At that time, I had never sent nude photos before. Story 27. He was mean, always making the most obvious low-hanging fruit type of jokes. Yet he was fragile and easily offended if anyone said anything about him. He was also quick to anger and would get jealous over things so petty that I couldn't even respond. He would have adult temper tantrums that were almost theatrical. Despite that, he was absurdly attractive, one of the best bodies I've ever seen. Even today, I would want to wear. However, I eventually realized he reminded me a lot of my abusive father, which took the shine off things. Story 28. I have been meaning to post this question. Many people ignore warning signs with attractive individuals, even in family and friendly relationships. Story 29. She would text me back once every 30 hours with a 2 to 5 word response. She was always busy whenever I asked her if we could meet. Whenever she wanted to see me, it was always on the way to something she had to do. I put up with it because she was very attractive, and people always complimented me on her. She insisted on paying for dinner, and our intimacy was enjoyable. My previous girlfriend had anger issues and wasn't very attractive. People would see her yell at me and tell me it wasn't worth it. So this new relationship was something I really wanted to work out. Only being able to see her once every 4 to 6 weeks was difficult. I noticed that I was the one who initiated all our conversations, so I decided to stop. Story 30. She went through all her finances in detail with me, as she was in massive debt. She shared all her credit card balances and admitted that she was completely broke. I thought it was strange. It turns out she was essentially grooming me to pay off her debts. On our last date, I asked her if we could reduce the amount of money I spent, like staying in more. She freaked out and started yelling at the top of her lungs about how she wasn't a gold digger. Keep in mind, I never once called her that or anything close to it. I quickly left after that. Story 31. Habitual heroin use. We dated for a couple of months. Then she disappeared without a trace. I never saw or heard from her again, nor did anyone else who knew her, including her family. This was long before social media and widespread internet access, during the earliest days of cell phones. She left almost everything behind in her apartment, except for her wallet and car keys, and walked away. Story 32. Saying you would look much more attractive if you lost weight on the second date. Saying I love you on the third date twice because I pretended I didn't hear the first time. Threatening to harm themselves when I didn't want to go for a 3-hour walk every single day. Story 33. Crying about his recently deceased dog 5 minutes into the meeting on the first date and discussing his ex for hours. Still kissed him, he was fine. Story 34. She had 2 children she didn't mention until after we spent the night together. The oldest was 12, and she didn't even get a babysitter or ask a relative to watch them. We live in suburbia. Nobody's going to hurt them. She completely discounted the possibility that they could hurt themselves in an accident. Story 35. Do not marry someone from a higher social class if you are male. I married into a wealthy family, and although I earn a good income for a middle-class individual, it will never feel sufficient. I also have to spend excessive amounts of money on things like hotel rooms, or she will not even consider going on vacations. She does not understand saving for a significant purchase, like a car, for example. She believes that one day you decide you want a new car, and the next day you buy one. That is how she thinks it works. It is very challenging. Nothing I can provide for her feels adequate. I was aware of this perspective before I got married, but I went ahead with it anyway. If anyone is reading this, please take my advice. Do not marry someone from a higher social class if you are male. Stay within your own social class. Story 36. Consistently speaking negatively about someone is harmful. Initially, it may seem obligatory to listen to their troubles, but when the conversation shifts to discussing individuals who have never interacted with you, it crosses the line from expressing concerns to mindless complaining, which is unappealing. Unsurprisingly, they also spoke negatively about me to others. Some individuals seem to lead miserable lives, and this behavior has become a deal breaker for me. Story 37. Violence and temper were evident. She was almost certainly bipolar and had borderline personality disorder. I was with her for 4 years. The first signs were early, but they were not directed at me, so I ignored them or chalked them up to trauma from her recent ex. About 1.5 years in, things started getting serious. At the 2-year mark, I needed to leave. It took me another 2 years and a human resources complaint for stalking. We worked at the same company, before she finally left me alone. Pro tip: if you see violent, unapologetic, and carefully hidden unhinged behavior, get out as quickly as you can. Story 38. He was a predator and groomer. I was 17 and he was 22. However, I later found out that he was with 13 and 15-year-olds. Story 39. She created a new Tumblr account every week and wrote a 5-page message about how she was breaking up with me multiple times a day. There was also the clear dishonesty and manipulation regarding her husband. I suppose having a husband was a red flag as well. Story 40. His incredibly aggressive personality. I am too, but I'm not super reactive anymore. I spent my 20s really learning to be quiet. He, unfortunately, did not. Story 41. She was dating someone when we first got together. It was obviously a significant red flag, but she told me that he wasn't good for her while claiming they were stuck in an apartment together, all the while leading both of us on. Story 42. We never dated, and honestly, I am thankful for it. He has been involved with many women. I should not have had a crush on him to begin with. That man was not committed. Story 43. Drug addict, alcoholic, and someone with a bad relationship with loving parents. I am a chronic cheater. I consider myself a bad person overall. However, those blue eyes made me overlook everything. Story 44. She stressed me out a lot. She lived with me for about 4 or 5 months, and from the second week, I thought I should kick her out. But I never acted on it. I started smoking, although I fortunately was able to quit without any problems. I was drinking more, lost weight, and became increasingly angry, letting it out when she wasn't around. Overall, I was miserable. She would threaten to leave over any small inconvenience. If I told her she needed to clean up after herself, she would scream at me. If I got annoyed about driving over an hour so she could visit her boyfriend, she would scream at me. We weren't even dating. If I asked her to help with the bills, she would scream at me. If I didn't take her to the mall every few days, despite us not having any money, I would get screamed at. For context, I had half-jokingly invited her to stay with me because her home life seemed chaotic, and I was barely getting by on my own. It turns out her home life was fine. She had just broken up with her boyfriend, couldn't stand to live alone, and didn't want to move back in with her mother, who would have welcomed her back. Additionally, she likely has borderline personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, or bipolar disorder. I wish I could say I miss her or that she was a good friend, but I don't. She burned those bridges long before she ever left. It's been about a year, and I genuinely have not felt as happy as I do now since I was with my ex in 2020. Story 45. She is very beautiful and conventionally attractive, looking like a princess. It's unfortunate that she is more attracted to her Dakamakura than to me. Story 46. We initially began a relationship while she was still with her boyfriend. After she broke up with him, we became serious, but, unsurprisingly, she cheated on me. Story 47. The combination of her being Russian and her desire to spend more time around the Air Force Base was noticeable. Fortunately, it was just a rebound, making it easier to walk away. Story 48. Hundreds of female best friends experience emotional unavailability. Communication often turns into arguments or debates. Issues of colorism and racism, as well as sexism, persist. Story 49. Cycles of emotional manipulation, guilt, accusations, and self-pity. Moving the relationship too fast. Had a significant history before we met. Blackout rages that often left one or both of us injured. Constant gaslighting. Struggled with alcohol and substance abuse. Double standards regarding friendships with exes. Had no male friends. One ex had a restraining order against him. A judge enforced a no-contact order on my behalf and wouldn't change it when I tried to have it removed. Constant accusations of bizarre and sometimes extreme behavior whenever we couldn't spend every moment together. After just a few months, I lost almost all my body fat. After a few years, I looked unwell. Doesn't accept no for an answer, ever. Placed the responsibility for his emotional state on me. Refused to seek therapy for his extreme mood swings. Couldn't understand why I wouldn't stay around during his meltdowns. Mistook my boundaries as manipulation and abuse. Name-calling, yelling, blocking my exit, taking my phone and other devices away. Threats and physical aggression during conflicts. The list goes on. He used to be the most charming person to me, but now when I see his face, I just feel sick. He was so good at making up after arguments, making me feel loved and special when things were good. But when his mood changed, it was a nightmare. 4 years of my life wasted because he was attractive and good in bed when I was in the mood. His last messages to me expressed his intent to harm himself and wished for terrible things to happen to me for going on a short road trip with my sister to adopt a kitten. I truly hope he gets the help he needs. Story 50. 40-year-old dad. He was the most narcissistic person I have ever known and extremely manipulative. I was 19 when we met. He is now back with his ex, who is 10 years older than him, and she is somewhat famous because of her work. She seems pretty serious, and I am really curious to know what she would think of him if she knew that. Story 51. She cried and told me she thought I saw her as an unattractive woman after I mentioned I wasn't in the mood for intimacy. This made me believe that if I didn't engage in intimacy, I was being unkind to my partner. Only through therapy did I discover otherwise. Story 52. She had never been sober for more than a couple of months and showed me the drawings she made during her last stay in the psychiatric ward on our second date. Story 53. He called me at 2 a.m. the night before our first date, asking me to pick him up from a location 90 minutes away because he had lost his friends. Story 54. They constantly needed attention from everyone, but I told myself it was just their friendly personality. Story 55. that every time we went on a date, he forgot his wallet. I was in high school and he looked exactly like Josh Hartnett. Story 56. One common denominator that I have no excuse for overlooking repeatedly was girls with wrist scars. If I'm being honest, I didn't really overlook them so much as I was just attracted to them. Additionally, I was drawn to girls with online journals and those who had boyfriends. Story 57. Misogynistic, selfish, and ignorant. I was blindsided by the affection at the start. The blue eyes and smile had me captivated. It was the worst year of my life. Story 58. He was quite excellent with words. He wrote like an author and made me feel special. He created the most beautiful surprise of my life. However, he was the most untrustworthy person I have ever met. Deceitful, unmotivated, and opportunistic. Story 59. He is uninformed, unambitious, and not intelligent. Our views do not align, but there is a strong physical attraction that is remarkable. Story 60. She chose to remain uninformed instead of making an effort to learn. She literally told me more than once, "I don't care if I'm wrong. I think I'm right," about matters like spelling words and calculating finances. These are things that are either correct or incorrect with no room for debate. Story 61. He said that he liked me but was still in love with the girl he broke up with a year earlier. Story 62. Realizing that those diamond eyes were merely cheap imitations of what lay beneath. Abuyed Bazdudja. Story 63. She told me proudly how her best friend back home cheated every time they went out. You will never guess what happened to me. Story 64. Persecution complex, constant expectations of special treatment compared to others, a continuous need for reinforcement, and an inability to accept even the slightest criticism or feedback. There were little lies that she would manipulate me about, making me believe they were my fault or not significant. Sudden erratic changes of plans, failure to fulfill promises followed by a constant stream of excuses, and the cycle of affection followed by abrupt withdrawal. These are all signs of a vulnerable narcissist with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as opposed to the dark triad type. Despite her beauty, intelligence, and charm, I allowed her to manipulate me for about 2 years. I finally severed all contact and feel as though a weight has been lifted. To clarify, she was not a girlfriend, but a supposed close friend. Story 65. My ex-girlfriend was gorgeous, academically brilliant, fun, gracious, artistically talented, poised, gifted, and articulate. However, she was also spoiled, sheltered, coddled, naive, self-centered, and superficial. Story 66. His shower floor had black mold on it. I never showered at his place, so I didn't find out until 7 months after we started seeing each other. Story 67. He had no friends and said it was because everyone is just fake. I thought it sounded profound. It turned out to be just a preview of the chaos. Story 68. He used to speak poorly about and shame girls he had willingly slept with at work in front of our coworkers. I had a significant crush on him, and we talked for a while before I realized we were not very compatible sexually or romantically, so I stopped communicating with him. The next thing I knew, a couple of girls at work approached me and told me he shared our private matters with them. Unprovoked, calling me various disrespectful names simply because I had the audacity to sleep with him. That information spread rapidly throughout our workplace, and it ultimately contributed to a new guy, whom I was starting to like, suddenly stopping communication with me. Story 69. Lying, drinking, and phone protectiveness, along with the realization that she was seeing her ex during the first couple of months we were talking, were issues that arose early on. Then she stepped out again within the first 6 months. Story 70. A salesman from another country with a playful personality. It was enjoyable to spend time together, and he was quite charming, but relationships like that often don't last. Story 71. She believed angels spoke to her. She was purifying her space with enchanted little pots of urine and somewhat wanted to be treated harshly by her boyfriend. She was also the most insecure person I had ever met. Oh, God. She broke my heart so deeply. Never again. Story 72. His lack of empathy and consideration led him to manipulate me into believing that my feelings were the problem, rather than his behavior toward me. Story 73. When you make excuses for the silence, ignore how your body tightens when you are around them, and never ask about your emotional state, only about your physical state. Story 74. She had a picture of herself holding up one index finger, framed on the wall above her bed, as if to say, "I'm number one." Story 75. He had genital herpes. I was just starting to date as an adult, and he was my first match on Hinge. He was extremely attractive, so I decided to give him a chance. He seemed very interested in me, but then suddenly stopped responding. At least I didn't get genital herpes. Story 76. When we first met, my charming ex mentioned that she had previously been involved with older married men. She jokingly referred to this as shooting fish in a barrel, said she regretted it, and wanted a normal relationship with someone her age. This was a lie. She was young and attractive and enjoyed pursuing affairs in other people's marriages for fun. Story 77. She would sprinkle cat food on her floor and let street cats walk into her house to eat. I foolishly thought, oh cool, she likes animals. That's a positive sign. Story 78. Zero common sense and poor skills in every aspect of life, including intimacy. She got scammed and had to move in with me early. She was an actual model. It's hard to forget the image of her walking around my apartment in her underwear. However, she lacked the mental capacity to perform simple tasks like flipping a light switch. I doubt she could even make a bowl of cereal. She was a terrible kisser and equally poor in intimacy. I thought I could teach her, but that was not the case. While she was always available, I realized she was more like a living doll, but less intelligent. Story 79. I am constantly accused of looking at other women, even though I don't remember doing so. She accuses me of walking faster in public because of another woman. This constant doubt makes me feel like I can only stare at the floor and walls, yet she still finds a way to accuse me of looking at others. When she accuses me, she becomes quiet and won't communicate what's wrong, despite my attempts to talk to her. She frequently mentions breaking up, only to regret it the next day and ask to reconcile. Story 80. She slept with her phone in her pillowcase for the last year. She discovered that she was living a completely separate life with someone else. Story 81. I have gone back to her multiple times in my adult life. Now at 34 years old, I have lost the desire to date anyone. I just want my peace. Story 82. The fact that he abandoned his cousin to go on a date with me, but did not apologize to the cousin sooner when I had told him to. Story 83. The entire man was a walking red flag, but the first sign was early on, still in the talking phase, when he got drunk, ordered $100 worth of food, and passed out. I had to accept and pay for the delivery, and he wasn't going to pay me back. He even got mad at me for bringing it up. This was not a we ordered delivery situation, he just did it. But he was gorgeous, so I let him walk all over me and mistreat me for the next 2 years. Never again. The silver lining is that I have never taken any abuse or disrespect from a man since then, 6 years post-breakup. All my patience was used up and then some with that guy. My current partner is full of positive qualities. Story 84. Not very attractive, but I'm very attached. I caught him cheating 5 times by using hookup apps and texting different people. He swore that he's never touched anyone else or been out with anyone else. I am very lost on what to do, as I am extremely emotionally attached. Story 85. Women with low self-esteem often seek validation through their relationships with multiple partners. This often led to me feeling like I had to put in extra effort to keep their interest, worried they might leave me for someone else. One such woman did not engage with me intimately but was involved with someone else during our time together. I attempted to be a supportive partner, but I was taken for granted. Interestingly, she has attempted to reconnect with me over the years and seemed upset when I reminded her of her past behavior towards me. Additionally, her appearance has significantly changed over time. Ultimately, personal change has to come from within. They must want to improve themselves. I recognize my own role in this situation for trying to rescue someone who was not ready to change. Story 86. He never wanted to talk about his feelings, but I was always supposed to be open and honest about mine. What hurt me the most was when he broke up with me and said that I had a victim complex because all I did was talk about my feelings and never his, even though I constantly asked if he was okay with the decisions I made regarding our relationship or financial well-being. I was in therapy and on antidepressants, but he would never open up to me. Looking back now, I understand that there were many red flags I was ignoring because I loved him and wanted things to work out. I wish I could go back and tell myself to look out for my own heart before his, but younger me probably wouldn't have listened anyway. I think I'm still a hopeless romantic, but I'd like to think that I'm a bit wiser now. Story 87. She had been intimate with her female best friend in the back seat next to my female best friend, who looked mortified, on the way to her apartment from the house party we attended. Took 40 minutes. When we arrived at her place, they continued. That was before we started our relationship. For my birthday, I didn't invite friends because of the party situation. She invited her friends, and I ended up spending my birthday surrounded by about 20 people she had been intimate with. That was just the first 3 months. I don't mean to shame anyone. I just look back and don't recognize the person I was. I was too accepting, too patient, too kind. Never again. I found the balance I needed. Historia 88. Me contaba cómo tenía intimidad con su expareja y me decía lo hermosa que le parecía su mejor amiga. Story 89. She criticized any female friend of mine and insisted that I end those friendships. I fell for that for too long before she became my ex. Story 90. He wouldn't take anything seriously. Anytime I tried to talk about how I was feeling or something that upset me, he would turn it into a joke or ignore it. Instead of leaving or confronting him, my mind just decided not to share my feelings anymore unless he asked. Story 91. She told me up front she is a heartbreaker. I admire her honesty and still think highly of her for that and other traits. She is brilliant and doing well. Story 92. We got lost using her GPS while driving her home one night after she crashed her car in my mom's driveway. Story 93. She slept with someone else right after we met. The first time I stayed at her place, another guy came knocking on her door late at night. The experience was enjoyable, though. Story 94. Literally saying the most degrading and offensive things to me. To be fair, I ignored these for a different reason than physical attractiveness. Story 95. Astronomically different political views led him to accuse me of cheating without cause multiple times, and he didn't like my family. The final nail in the coffin was when he randomly dumped me at the lowest point of my life. I am now grateful because I am no longer tied to someone I had to walk on eggshells around or constantly agree with. I can have opinions again without fear of argument. Story 96. Telling me during our first meeting, she said, "I'd love to see how much pain you could withstand before blacking out." Story 97. He belittled me and allowed his friend to join in as well. It happened almost every day. I'm glad I am no longer with him. Story 98. Emotional immaturity and a pattern of intense, short-lived flings ended with him ghosting girls who developed feelings for him. Story 99. She used to be on heroin as a teenager and is now proudly sober. There is nothing wrong with that, but she was drinking a beer when she told me. Story 100. Claimed to be in love with me after one date, then cried until I agreed to be in a relationship with her. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.